Welcome back to the next step in the Educator.com academic writing sessions. So far we've gone over a lot, and now we're actually getting ready to the point where we're actually going to be organizing our essays together. So, what we're working with specifically for this lesson is we've already gotten past the introduction paragraphs and the thesis, and now we're actually going to be kind of working with our 1, 2, 3 body paragraphs. Now, you might think like this is going to be a really long lesson, but it's not going to be any longer than either of the other ones. I'm just talking about organizing these paragraphs and how they're going to be organized. After this lesson, we're going to go over some specific patterns of organization. But for this one, I'm giving you general ideas. Be careful and pay close attention, because at the end of this lesson, you are writing your very first VSE, otherwise known as the very simple essay. Now, we already know what the topic and the thesis are, and we also know what major details are. But what does that correspond to in an essay? Well, normally if you got a major detail, it's normally exactly 1 per each body paragraph. So, if you have 3 major details from your topic, you know that you're going to write exactly 3 paragraphs, which fits in perfectly with the 5-paragraph essay format. These minor details we're going to be going over more. You already kind of know, and they support the major details, so they don't get their own paragraph, but maybe they get their own little sentence. Now, how exactly do we organize a series of 3 paragraphs? Now, we don't just put them in a salt shaker and then throw it out and just put them in any old order. We have to put them in an order that will make sense to the reader. And here's kind of an analogy that will help you understand it. Let's say that I'm telling a story about a sailor, the girl, and a mean pirate. Now, what does a sailor want? Well, this sailor is tired of being a sailor, and he's ready to go home and marry the girl. Can you guess what the mean pirate's going to do? Yes, he's going to be the villain. Now, I want you to think about all the movies you've seen and all the books you've read, and think carefully. Who do you normally see first? The supporting character, the main character, or the villain? Most books, you see the hero first. So, if I was to introduce these characters in a story, I would introduce them in a certain order. That order is probably going to look like this. I'm going to introduce my sailor, and I'm going to put P for protagonist, and then I'm going to introduce the girl, and she's going to be S for supporting character, and the mean pirate, and he's of course going to be V for villain. 1, 2, 3. This is pretty standard story format, and it's because it makes sense to an audience. If I introduce the villain first, it's going to feel like it's the villain's story. I could introduce the girl first because, well, she's still a good person, but then she's going to be the protagonist, not the sailor. We want to introduce our protagonist first. And so, likewise, main character, protagonist, and supporting characters and villain, we assign and order characters in a story based on their roles. And just like that, we will order our paragraphs in our essay based on their roles. Now, I really wish that ordering paragraphs was as simple as picking main character, supporting character, villain, but it's not that simple. It's actually really complicated, and you have to think a little creatively and think about an audience and think about some general guidelines that will help you order these points. So, let's begin. One role for a paragraph is description and definition. So, let's imagine our thesis was this. You can prevent a Jabberwocky from haunting you with 2 simple steps. Raise your hand if you know what a Jabberwocky is. Well, no. You, the audience of this thesis, and me, have no idea what a Jabberwocky is. If this is going to be a well-written essay, somebody has to tell me what a Jabberwocky is. And that's kind of the one role that a paragraph can have. I can spend 1 major supporting detail just defining something. Here's another one. Background information. The Spanish Armada was sent to invade England, but instead sank into the North Atlantic Ocean. Okay, Is there maybe some background information that you need to understand this thesis and the importance of this thesis? I know I do. I need to know, why did the Spanish want to invade England in the first place? So maybe one role that a paragraph will play will be to give this background information. Here's another role for an essay, for a paragraph, excuse me. In order to meet all the demands for new cars, Henry Ford developed mass production. Okay, this thesis is called a problem and solution thesis. And so you can bet that the paragraphs are going to be the roles of problem or solution. So what's a demand for new cars? And how did Henry Ford solve it? Now, if I'm giving you a problem and solution essay, then we need to know what's going to come first, the problem or solution. I'm not going to tell you what should come first, but I bet you can guess and figure that out. So, another example is maybe one role of a paragraph is to expand on certain characters mentioned in the thesis. What if my thesis was this? Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader demonstrate the hero-shadow theme in storytelling. Most of you know a little bit about Star Wars. Some of you maybe hate Star Wars and are wondering why teachers talking about it. Well, if that's the case, then I bet that the writer of this thesis needs to give some background information about Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker. So that's another role that a paragraph will play. Where it's going to go in paragraphs 1, 2, and 3, we'll find out in a minute. So let's think about actually organizing these major points and organizing these paragraphs. The next couple examples I'll show you will have a thesis and 3 major supporting details, and I'll give you some guidelines as to how to order them. Here's my thesis. Thomas Jefferson was a hypocrite because he owned slaves while endorsing liberty and abolition. Abolition, of course, is let's free all the slaves in Virginia. We don't want slaves anymore. That's bad. Here are my major supporting details. Thomas Jefferson had a child with Sally Hemings, his slave. Thomas Jefferson fought for abolition. Thomas Jefferson was a slave-owning plantation owner. Think about this thesis. I'm making a claim. I'm trying to convince you of something. What if you were the big fan of Thomas Jefferson and you thought he could do no wrong? What do I have to do to convince you? Well, how I organize these things might help. I'm going to put my strongest detail last, or in this case, since it's persuasive, my strongest reason or my strongest argument. I think that the strongest argument is this right here. Thomas Jefferson had a child with Sally Hemings, his slave. Man, I have just illustrated how much a hypocrite that guy was. I want to free all the slaves, and I'm going to have a baby with one. Here's another example. Slytherin House is not evil, but rather simply ambitious, talented, and misunderstood. Okay, do you know what Slytherin House is? Some of you do, some of you have no idea. Again, I have to think about an audience when I'm organizing these essays. And I bet that there's a particular role that a major supporting detail might help. Here are my major details. Slytherin House values ambition and talent. What Slytherin House is and who are its students. And why other houses misunderstand Slytherin. What do you think should go first? Well, imagine if I said Slytherin House values ambition and talent, but you have no idea what Slytherin House is. I might as well have just said Jabberwocky values ambition and talent. So, if I really want to organize this essay well, I need to make sure that description and definition paragraphs come first. In this case, what Slytherin House is and who are its students. One major supporting detail, then these 2 and 3 are going to make a lot more sense. Here's another example. This one's really easy. Thesis. Meg Murray begins a story feeling stupid, faces challenges, and overcomes the power of it. This is Wrinkle in Time, everybody. And so far, you can probably guess how these major supporting details are going to be ordered. Meg has something it does not have. I'm not ruining the ending for you, but you'll find out. Meg and her friends go to Camelot's and find it strange. Meg feels like a lonely loser. What order did these happen in? Did she go to Camelot's before she went it? Was she feeling like lonely and a loser after she realized she had something it did not have? This is a very easy pattern of organization for these 3 points. You just put them in the order that they happened. This is called chronological order, and I'm going to spend half a lesson explaining what chronological order is later. So, in the beginning, Meg feels like a lonely loser. Then, her and her friends go to Camelsot's and find it strange. Meg has something it does not have. Now, here we go. Back to Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. This one's going to be a little bit more complicated. Thesis: Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader demonstrate the hero-shadow theme in storytelling. Okay, raise your hand if you have any idea what hero-shadow theme is in storytelling. You probably don't. You probably have no idea what I'm talking about, and maybe you as the audience don't even care. That's because this hero and shadow theme is an idea. It is something that is abstract. It is something that you can't see. It's something that you can't relate to. But Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader are characters. They're people, fictitious people, but they're also human beings. Now, here are my major details. What is a hero-shadow theme? Who is Darth Vader? Who is Luke Skywalker? What do you think people relate to more? What do they want to hear about first? This is a very, very simple rule. Introduce people and characters before you introduce ideas. This is so important. Most people care about other people. So I'm going to talk about Luke Skywalker, I'm going to talk about Darth Vader, and then I'm going to talk about this idea, this hero-shadow theme. By the time you get to paragraph 3, you're going to care, because I've already talked about these 2 characters, and hopefully in the essay, by paragraph 3, you care about them and you care about this hero-shadow theme. Sometimes, though, listing, when you just list ideas, sometimes the order can seem kind of arbitrary. But you know what? Even with ideas like this, there are ways that you can actually organize it effectively. So, there are 3 types of animal eating habits. And I bet from your biology class you already know what these are. There's omnivores, which eats omni, or everything. There's herbivores, which eat only plants. And there's carnivores that only eat other animals. It kind of seems like I could put these in any order I want. But it turns out there actually is kind of a method that I could put here that'll help making these orders make sense. I am going to introduce 2 opposites or 2 extremes first, and then I'm going to introduce the middle way. Herbivores only eat plants. Carnivores only eat other animals. Omnivores are in the middle, and they eat everything. What's another example? There are Republicans, there are Democrats, and there are third parties. Do you kind of see how that works? So, that's an example of 2 opposites or 2 extremes, and in something that's kind of in the middle of those 2 extremes. Maybe if I'm going to talk politics again, I could say there are conservatives, radicals, and moderates. Here we go. This is an example of the problem-solution issue. So, cars pollute the environment, gas is very expensive, we need more public transportation. Now, here are my major details. Public transportation, cars pollute, gas is very expensive. I want your attention. I want to convince you. Should I give you the solution first, or should I give you the problem first? What do you think? What's going to grab the reader's attention? What's going to help them follow this essay? Well, I bet if I ring the bell and cause an alarm first, that'll help. I'm going to describe problems, and then I'm going to describe the solution. After you have a reader feeling the gravity and seriousness of the problem, they want to listen to a solution. If you give them the solution first, they're not going to care about the problems because the problem's already solved. So, when you do a problem-solution essay, make sure you give the problem and then you give the solution. Now, we are ready to write and begin writing the very simple essay. It starts with something like this. I'd like you to do a lot of brainstorming and continue with your thesis, continue with major supporting details, and then follow this outline. You'll find copies of this on the website. For paragraph 1, think of that introduction paragraph. Write out maybe just a brief little bit about how you're going to introduce it, and then actually write out in this part of the outline your actual thesis. The thesis you're going to use, the very best one you have. Think about how you're going to introduce it. Go back and watch that introduction paragraph lesson again if you need to. Then go to body paragraphs 2, 3, and 4, or body paragraphs 1, 2, and 3. Write down what those major details are. And then below that, write 2 to 3 minor supporting details that support each one of those major supporting details. Finally, go back to that closing paragraph and try to paraphrase that thesis. Write down a paraphrase of the thesis or rephrasing of the thesis right there. That way, when you get to your closing and you're actually typing, you don't have to sit and think about it, and it'll be just right there for you, and you can just insert that in and be done. Here again are some of the sample keywords for you. You can make sure that you use first, second, third, etc., any numbers. However, in contrast, on the other hand, if you're talking about how herbivores are different than carnivores, furthermore, additionally, another. And if for those minor supporting details, don't forget, for example, for instance, specifically, to illustrate, and also for that last essay, in closing, to sum up, to end, to finish. That's for your final paragraph. Make sure you give a nice big signal to your reader saying, hey, we're almost done here. So, your very simple essay is going to be on any topic or thesis you choose. This is absolutely 100% your decision. In fact, it's really great when you have that, because then you're going to be writing and it's going to be easier for you. You already know about it. That's why this is the very simple essay. Your thesis, anything you can think of. By now, you've written some, and you've written some major supporting details. You got your journal entries if you need new ideas. You should have no problem coming up with a thesis that you choose. And if you're worried, you don't know which one is the best one, roll dice to choose one if you need to. Just get a thesis going. Your very simple essay needs to be 600 to 800 words. I think I'd like it to see it a little bit closer to 800 if you really, really want to do a good job. But think about quality, not quantity at the same time, but go for 600 to 800 words. That's your range. Less than 600 words, that's more like 2 paragraphs as opposed to, maybe a real 5-paragraph essay. Very simple does not mean very short. Please continue reading Wrinkle in Time, chapters 8 through 9, and Brave New World, chapter 16. And I know that you are going to be working so hard on your very simple essay, on the thesis you choose, that there's no written response. So, go ahead and write that response, and then continue on with the next lesson where we go over some more specific patterns of organization that will help you write a very long essay of, maybe 1,500 words or 2,000 words next. Till then, thanks for using educator.com.